it's really important as a business owner that you do have an understanding of how to run a business, especially if you want to scale that business. You can't just be good at what you do. You have to actually understand how to run a business. And a big part of that is the financial part of it. Your net profit as a sole proprietor should be closer to from between 40 to 60%. That's probably a lot higher than most people think it should be. And the reason, especially when you're starting out, the reason why it should be so high is that you need to be able to hire people eventually as you're scaling. You're going to need to outsource certain things. You're going to have to hire admin eventually. So it gives you space to be able to hire, to be able to reinvest back into the business, and to be able to pay taxes. I have seen people become very successful and then and hire managers and step away and stop paying attention to their business, and the business has crashed. I've actually seen that several times.
If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Welcome, Digital Trailblazers. This is Leah Ray with the Digital Trailblazer podcast, and I'm super excited to introduce you to Natalia Zacharin. Natalia, go ahead and let our audience know what you do.
Hi, I'm very excited to be here as well. So I own an accounting firm. We're a little bit different than your typical CPA firm in that not only do we do your bookkeeping, your AR, AP, but we really specialize in CFO services. So we advise clients on how to understand their numbers.
And that's why we brought you on today, is to have an interesting conversation, because many people in the online space, we just kind of do it. Right? We get started, we dive in. It's about just making sales, figuring it out, which is awesome. But at the same time, most people here in this space don't slow down enough to actually understand the numbers of their business, what they should be tracking, why they should be tracking it, all of those different things to make sure that they're on track and that they're safe, and everything else that they need to understand for their business.
So for someone who's a solopreneur or just, a small business owner, or they're just getting started, this whole concept of looking at your numbers and, potentially having to hire that out or something like that, to a lot of people, to them, it sounds like just another expense in their business that, they might be wondering, well, what's the benefit? What's the payoff? Why do I really need to do this? If I can just look at my bank account and see that, oh, well, the money is growing or the money is not growing, and that's all I need to know. What would you say to them about, why is it really important in order to track those numbers and know them, and have them tracked on paper? Why is that so important versus just looking at your bank account?
Yeah, so really good question. And a lot of people don't feel like they want to spend the money and it's just another expense. But there's a couple ways to look at it. First of all, you can learn it yourself and take the time to do so. It's really important as a business owner that you do have an understanding of how to run a business, especially if you want to scale that business. You can't just be good at what you do. You have to actually understand how to run a business. And a big part of that is the financial part of it. There are there's a lot of data out there. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of YouTube videos. You can learn it yourself. And I do recommend that you learn a lot of it yourself. But hiring someone really speeds up that process. And then hiring someone allows you to learn it a lot faster and to bounce those ideas off of someone else and ask questions in live time. I brought up the fact that, hire someone to clean your house. I know how to scrub my toilets. I can do it really, really well. But in the time that it takes me to do so, I could have done something to really boost my business. So I hire someone to do that. And I feel the same way about a lot of other ways to outsource in your business. if you can save yourself time, that means that you can grow your business and scale faster. So it's there's a great book actually by Dan Sullivan. It's called Who Not How, where figure out what you're doing, what you need done, and who can do that for you, so that you can keep scaling and growing. You can't do everything, and you can't be great at everything. So you'll need to have mentors. You'll need to outsource certain things. You'll need to not do other things. You'll have to sacrifice time or sacrifice other things that you do. But it's really important to build that inner circle or that inner and outer circle around your business so that you can keep growing and scaling.
So I would love for you to explain, we'll dive a lot into that on this episode, but like, how did you get started with this? Where did this start for you?
So not a journey that I was expecting. A lot of people start their businesses because they're specifically good at something or they have a passion about something. I had no idea. I used to be actually in sales several decades ago. And then I became a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years and went through a divorce. And after my divorce, it was very hard to get back into the sales space. And it was actually really hard to get any kind of job. So I finally got a job, and that job was in the invoicing department of a large corporation. And I really got along well with the CFO, and he taught me a lot of things. And I would chat with him often, and their controller ended up leaving. So I walked into his office and I said, whatever she was doing, if you show me, I can do it. So I'd stayed there for about 6 years. He left in that time period. And about the last 1 or 2 years after he left, things started changing dramatically for me. The company started growing and changing and pivoting. And I just wasn't seeing the opportunities that I needed. And it got actually worse. They started kind of downgrading what I was doing because I think they wanted a lot of their older population to leave. And I'm older, so I'm a single mom. And at the age of 49-ish, I was like, this is not working out. I can't really afford to have a lifestyle. So I actually just met a man, and he owns a tax firm. And he said, why don't you start your own accounting firm, just doing bookkeeping? And I thought, that's crazy. I'd never done bookkeeping before. But it sounded like a good idea to kind of learn and do it on the side. And that's kind of how it started. I was thinking, I'll just do it on the side and just to make ends meet. But it just started growing, and it was too much to work full time and be a single mom and do this on the side. It was feeling like very overwhelming. And at 50 years old, I walked into the office. I had been doing it for 8 months. And at 50 years old on my birthday, I walked in the office and I quit my job. And I was just all in. I'm like, I'm either going to make it or I'm going to drown, but I can't do it all. So, and that's kind of how it started, and just kept going.
What were some of the struggles or challenges that you had in transitioning from that corporate space into your own business?
Oh, a lot of different struggles. The first struggle was figuring out that I felt like I didn't know anything, and I felt like an imposter. So a lot of us have imposter syndrome, and we do know things. And I actually had imposter syndrome because I was an imposter. I was still learning as I was doing it. So I would say that the first biggest hurdle was to just understand that I can learn whatever I need to learn. And as long as I kept learning and kept doing, I was getting better and better at what I was doing. The second hurdle was to figure out the sales piece, right? To get new clients. I was, being a single mom, I had no other income coming in. I had to make it work, and I had to make it work quickly. So the sales piece was a big struggle for me to figure it out. And to be honest, it's a continuous struggle to figure out because it feels like it changes all the time. So it's just not having an emotional reaction of just, learning as much as you can, having mentors, reading books, figuring things out, and then not having an emotional reaction to it not working out for yourself, so that you have the ability to logically and pragmatically look at what you need to tweak. So that was a big learning curve for me also, because I become very emotional, and it's very upsetting when things aren't working out. And, when you're trying to sell and it's not working out, it also feels Like people are rejecting you, so it doesn't feel good. So I had to get over all of that and say, it's not a rejection. It's me. I need to figure out how to be better at selling and not feel salesy. So figure out that people that need our services or need my services are looking for me. So not to feel like I'm being salesy by reaching out to people, because if people need accounting help, they're going to be searching for accounting help. And if I just pop into their life, they'll be grateful. So I started thinking about things a little bit differently. I would say those were the biggest hurdles. Actually, one more really big hurdle, and I think a lot of us struggle with this, is pricing correctly and understanding the value that I was bringing, and not. So I see this a lot with the clients that we work with as well, of not pricing high enough for the value that you bring. So that is a really big learning curve, and a continuous learning curve, to be honest.
I think those across the board for a lot of people, like if they're starting up their business, those are typically the three biggest challenges that they're going to run into. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. How do you feel, like what has been instrumental for you in actually overcoming those?
So for the sales is just continuously doing it and not feeling, actually sales, I feel like real sales is almost counterintuitive because we shy away from it. You have to put yourself out there. You have to, be the expert in your field. You have to give the recommendations to the prospect. You have to reach out to them. It doesn't feel good and it feels uncomfortable. And I even find this with clients, because sales fixes everything. I hate to say it, but you can have so many things that are wrong with your business and screw a lot of things up. But if you are really good at sales, it fixes a lot. So if you it just doesn't feel good. So a lot of people avoid getting into their sales. They will do other things. They'll pitter patter around. They'll get busy on doing other things. They'll do client work, everything to avoid sales. And actually sales is probably the most important thing, especially when you're starting out and getting that done. So learning to be consistent and doing it every single day, doing some kind of marketing, sales, reaching out, lead generation, that is a daily task for every business owner.
What I liked about what you said before about just that mindset of when we face a failure, like if you go for a sale or you get chewed out, if you call up a prospect and, they don't answer or whatever it is, one of our early mentors kind of talked to us about that, because that was, that's something that everybody faces, right? Like it's all a numbers game. And
yes,
in order to be successful, you don't need big numbers. Actually, we're talking about very small numbers. We're talking, if you have a sales rate of 1% to 3%, you've got a 7-figure business, right? What a lot of people don't realize is that, if you want a 1% conversion rate, well, that means you're getting rejected 99 times, right? And the thing is, like one of our early mentors told us was, you got to think about this like you're a tiger, right? And you think about a tiger and they're hungry and they're going to go hunting. And if they see an elk out there or whatever it is, and they go and try to kill the elk to feed their family and the elk gets away, does the tiger, beat themselves up over it? Do they get depressed and say, oh, I'm a failure as a tiger. I'm never going to do this. And, do they have that fear of failure of going out for the next elk? Do they, fill their time with busy work, doing other tiger things so they don't have to go out and hunt another? No, they don't do any of that. They just get right back up and they find another elk and they hunt that one down, right? And as an entrepreneur, that's the type of mindset you need to have when you're going for the sale. And I think, just like you said, it's just a matter of consistency. You don't have to have that emotional attachment to every sale. You just have to know that if you're consistent and you keep doing the right things, that eventually the sale is going to come. And you don't need a high conversion rate, 1% to 3%, depending on the price of the product, maybe 5%. That's enough to build a 7-figure business.
Yes, exactly. I would say that if you're closing too many, if you're closing like at 80% or more, your pricing is probably too low.
Well, and on the flip side of that, if your pricing is really low and you're not making sales, then that probably is an indication that people think that there's something not right about this, right? That it's too good to be true. There's some reason why they're pricing it too low. It can work the other way too,
yes,
having too low of pricing.
100%. So what have you found that works really well for you for bringing in new clients?
Just consistently reaching out. I started in 2019 and was virtual in January 2019 before COVID. So it wasn't popular at all to be calling people on the phone and convincing them to send me their most private, secure information in like their bank accounts and such, because I was an accountant. And I overcame a lot of that by just constantly reaching out. I did join a few networking groups. I was constantly looking at what works and what is just wasting my time, because time is really precious. So I would be very intentional with everything I did. And then in 2020, when COVID hit and everybody was very virtual, and there were a lot of virtual groups and Facebook groups, I joined many entrepreneur groups. And I would just go on the happy hours and networking and reach out to people, answer a lot of questions, help people. So I put a lot of value out there, just like, all the gurus say. I was just trying to make connections. It's a great way to also learn. And people just started contacting me and started referring me. So every time someone heard that someone was looking for accounting, they would put us in touch with each other. So that's kind of how it started. I used a lot of LinkedIn reaching out to people. So I made sure that like my profile looked good, my headline looked good, and I would directly connect with people and reach out. Sometimes the people just see what you do. So as soon as you connect and they can see your headline and they have a need, they'll instantly start talking to you. So just those little things. My clients, a lot of our clients give us referrals. I did find a few referral partners as well, and constantly looking for referral partners. And just recently, I started using Facebook and Instagram ads. And that's just recently. We're already at 7 figures. So I didn't want and didn't have the cash flow to be able to do that before. So we grew to nearly 7 figures before we even spent the money on that. But I think that we were probably delayed. We probably could have done it a little sooner. I was just nervous about the money because I'm an accountant. But just lots of different avenues.
So what are some of the numbers and things that solopreneurs or really small business online entrepreneurs, what should all of us know? Like what's really important that we might not be understanding or even tracking to be able to pay attention to in our businesses?
So everything is about numbers in your business. It's honestly the language of your business. And you can find out a lot about what is happening in a business by looking at the financials. So the first thing is you need to have financials. And many people delay this and they're like, oh, I'm too small to have accounting or do bookkeeping. You're never too small. You should start from the very beginning. If you don't know how to do your accounting or bookkeeping, it's a great thing to outsource. And it takes time to learn it. And we actually usually prefer to use QuickBooks Online, and that's what we recommend. And that's it's a perfect recommendation for like the majority of the businesses. So QuickBooks Online has a lot of tutorials, a lot of videos, but it is tricky because you not only have to somewhat understand accounting, you have to understand how the software reacts. So it can get messy. So hiring someone is probably a good idea. Not only that, I really believe in to save room and space for yourself, and like the headspace, and to not have to overwhelm yourself with lots of different things. So you need to focus on building your business. Like maybe you don't need to be doing your accounting. Maybe you don't need to be doing some other things. Maybe you don't need to be doing your food shopping, get Instacart and DoorDash. Maybe you don't need to be cleaning your house anymore, because in the time that you clean your house, you could have sold a client and made $5,000. So you have to start making space for yourself. So time is also money. And once you get your accounting, what do you look for? You look for the milestones. You look for, when am I going to be profitable? So that's going to be the bottom line. So as soon as your numbers are accurate, you start reading. There's 2 reports that are the most important to read, and that's the profit and loss, which is the income statement, and then the balance sheet. At the very bottom of the profit and loss is your net profit. That number is really important because that number tells you if your business is profitable or not. So it's a lot of people gauge how well they're doing by their bank account, and that's a terrible gauge because what's in your bank account is different than how much money your business is actually making. And everything, like when we look at the numbers, it's like looking at a series of like plumbing, and we can see where all of the little bottlenecks might be. So it's really important to get all of that information into your QuickBooks, to start working on that, to start looking at it, to engage, maybe work with a mentor or work with an accountant to see what's going on, and to just understand, and that actually helps you really understand the numbers.
I know that we use QuickBooks ourselves. I know a lot of our colleagues and clients use QuickBooks as well. I know that my accountant does stuff with it. I don't know what he does. So, so with that, you're saying pay attention. How often do you recommend that people actually look at their profit and loss statement?
So I would ask your accountant and say, you should be receiving your financials at least once a month. So at the end of the month, so right now, December is almost ending. By the first 2 weeks of January, you should get your reports for December, and you should take a look, like, what does that top line? The top line is the income. What does my revenue look like? What does my gross profit look like? And what does my profit look like? Those are really the main three numbers. And ask your accountant to show you how to look at it. It's really, if you work with a CFO, they actually analyze it with you, and they go through and they make projections and forecasts and graph things out. You probably don't need that, especially when you're first starting out. But if you ask your bookkeeper or your accountant, can you please help me understand what this report is actually showing me? That's a really good way to start. And you should look at it monthly, because in finance, it's not where you are now, it's the trend. So if you're looking at it monthly, first of all, you get used to it. Second of all, you can see, okay, well, this is what it was like in December. This is what it's like in January. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it seasonal? Is it going up and down? Like, what's happening with the profit? Is it going up slightly? Is it trending down? Like, that's not a good sign. Then it gives you time to micro correct. It also allows you to look at the revenue. So if you want to grow your business, look at your revenue line and be like, is it going up? What does that look like? And you can even map out, like we were talking about sales before. So you can map out your sales. How many leads did you get? How many people did you actually talk to? How many people did you close? And what are those percentages? And start seeing what your patterns are. Because everything's a pattern in numbers. And if you can see those patterns, it's just data. Don't get upset with it. Like you were talking about, the elk and the lion. Don't get upset with everything, or the tiger. But just look at the patterns and see what is happening and in which direction you're going. And you can actually start predicting what your numbers are going to be.
That's awesome. So is there any sort of like percentages or trends or growth lines or anything that we should be aiming for, or
Sure.
is healthy for your business?
So I would actually say it sounds like most of your listeners are service-based businesses. Is that correct? So, and because it's a little bit different for service versus product. So we can talk about both, but for service-based businesses, what we're looking at is when you're looking at your revenue, if you have a gross profit, that means maybe you're hiring out. So for instance, a person who is a videographer, maybe they hire editors, and, that's going to be their gross profit because they need to hire someone else in order to create their product. So the gross profit should be between 60 to 80% of the revenue. And then your profit, your net profit as a sole proprietor should be closer to from between 40 to 60%. That's probably a lot higher than most people think it should be. And the reason, especially when you're starting out, the reason why it should be so high is that you need to be able to hire people eventually as you're scaling. You're going to need to outsource certain things, and you're going to eventually you'll need someone to replace the 5 things that you're doing. You're going to have 1 to 2 people start replacing those things. You're going to have to hire admin eventually. So it gives you space to be able to hire, to be able to reinvest back into the business, and to be able to pay taxes. So a gauge of 40 to 60% in profit is really important. Once you start growing and scaling, that's going to keep going up and down. So after your first $250,000 in gross revenue, is when you should really start considering who you're going to hire as your first full-time equivalent employee. So each $200,000 to $250,000 in gross revenue should be a full-time equivalent employee. If you're at 200,000 and you feel like you need to hire 5 more people, there's something wrong. There's either something wrong with your process, there's something wrong with your pricing, there's something wrong with how you're streamlining things. Maybe you need to automate things. Maybe you don't need to do so many things. So if you feel like, you're, especially like if you're $100,000 in revenue and you need to hire like another full-time person, there's something wrong and you need to fix that first before you can hire them. So 200,000 and 250,000 is a really good gauge. Every time you hit that new metric, that's another full-time equivalent person. That doesn't include outsourcing, because outsourcing isn't full-time equivalent. You're probably not going to pay 80,000. So full-time equivalent person is around 80,000. And so you just start scaling, and you get to your first 250,000, you hire your first full-time person. That person should take off enough from your plate so that you can continue to grow the business another 250,000. And so if you are at that 40 to 60% profit, you can afford those people and that growth and what you need to build and the taxes.
Having those numbers like that is, I think, really helpful for people, because one of the questions we get all the time is like, well, when should I start hiring a call center? When should I start hiring a closer? When should I, outsource this or that? And having those numbers is really helpful. I know that one of the things that's being advertised out there all the time, especially in our niche, is call centers, right? Is hiring out your sales team. And so we'll get a lot of people asking us, well, how do I find a setter? How do I find a closer? And one of the first questions we'll ask them is, well, how much are you making? Because if you're not making enough money, if you're not generating enough revenue, you're not going to be able to pay them. And it's not going to matter, right? You'll hire them, and especially when you pay them on commission, right? You pay these people on commission. If your business is not bringing in enough revenue that they can't make enough in commission to support themselves, well, you're going to waste a bunch of your time and their time, and they're not going to be happy when they leave. So yeah, having those numbers, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, I find that's the biggest problem that most entrepreneurs have. We do a ratio of like how much revenue you have compared to what is your payroll. And it's always, your people are going to be the most important investment that you make in your business. So you have to have the revenue to support it. And when we're seeing that the bottom line where the business is not making enough profit, it's always because they have too many people working for them and not enough revenue to support it, almost every time. So like 90%. The other thing I would say is it's too soon to hire sales until you know and figured out your own sales, because you don't know if someone else is going to be good at it until you get good at it. And I really feel like most people start hiring sales way too soon, and they really need to get good at their own sales first.
I was going to say, that's another thing that we see all the time, is that, people who are experts in their own field and they want to start their own business, like they want to avoid the actual business stuff.
Yeah.
Right? They want to stay in their own lane. They want to stay in their zone of genius. And they're told that, you can do that. Just stay in your zone of genius, focus what you're good on, and, outsource and hire out everything else. Well, there's certain things that you need to learn how to do if you want to actually own your own business. You need to learn how to be a business owner. Mm-hmm. And that means you need to know marketing. You need to know sales, at least those things. Social media, all the tedious and mundane, the easy stuff, the low level at tasks and activities. Those are the first things you should outsource. But you should know how to run your business, right? You shouldn't put yourself into a situation where if you lose an employee, your business is failing, right? Because you don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and you will lose employees. There's probably about a 50% chance that someone's going to stay with you and grow with you. And so every time you hire someone, there's a 50% chance they're going to stay. So if you hire 10 people, only 5 of them will stay with you for any given amount of time. And that's a normal percentage. So you have to know what everybody's doing. You have to know how they do it. And you have to hire, people that also, that they document what they're doing. So it's not, being a business owner is not just what you do and staying in your own zone of genius, like you were saying. You really have to understand everything about your business for a very long time. I have seen people become very successful and then and hire managers and step away and stop paying attention to their business, and the business has crashed. I've actually seen that several times.
I can imagine like that's the scary part, right? Because everybody wants to build it and then bring on people to manage it. Because that's the dream, right? You have the revenue coming in and you're not in the weeds of it, but that's still your baby and no one's going to treat it like you will.
Yes.
So yeah, it's so important to remember. And it drives me nuts because I manage our sales team. So we have a sales team. It has been very challenging, right? Because I'm really good at sales and bringing in people to work with and to handle that part. I think people often think of it as their big solution. Like I'm just, I don't know how to do sales, or I'm not making enough sales. I'm just going to bring in someone and that's going to be their job. And what I really bring home to them is like, you have to be teaching these people every single day what they're doing. Like you have to review their sales calls. You have to give them tips. You have to share with them, this is, I see what you were doing, but if you had done it this way, I think you would have gotten a better result, right? You have to be in the weeds. Otherwise, your team is not going to perform to their optimal and you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. So I love that we're definitely aligned in this. You have to learn these things yourself and then you can bring on people, but then you're still going to be really nurturing them. And you can't teach them what to do if you haven't done it yourself. Like that's
exactly
silly.
Yeah.
And you also can't expect them to just know what to do just because they have experience. And that's the other lesson that we kind of had to learn the hard way was, if you hire an experienced call setter or if you hire an experienced call closer, a lot of people do this. And because it's advertised this way too, right? Is that, hey, we'll fully, we'll hire and we'll train your call setters and your closers and we'll, wrap them up and whatever it is. And, they'll perform up the KPI and all that stuff. And you kind of have this expectation that somebody else is going to take care of it for you. They're going to place them. You're not going to have to do anything. And they're just going to make your business grow. And time again, it just doesn't happen that way. The person comes on and really what they do is they waste your time and they waste your money.
Yes.
Right. And they also, can sometimes damage your business because now they're doing things with your Facebook profile or they're doing things with your social media assets that make you look really spammy and scammy. Right. And so it can hurt your business in that way as well.
And then it goes back to the numbers too. You can actually uncover who is efficient and productive by looking at the numbers. So we uncovered with one client that he had a sales manager and a couple salespeople, and the business just was not scaling and not growing. And I'm like, where's all the new business? And the manager kept saying he's making all of these calls. So we just kept, during our CFO call, we would just keep talking about it. And I said, well, if your salesperson is not closing anybody, your sales manager is really not closing anybody, what is going on here? Something's wrong. So he started digging in and asking questions. We did come to find out, actually, that the sales manager was intentionally putting in numbers that he was making these calls and he was not. And so he ended up, being terminated by that client. But that would not have been uncovered unless you were paying attention to those numbers. So it's not just your revenue and your profit, but it's all of the numbers in your business. If you have a sales team, even if it's you're doing the sales yourself, it's, again, how many leads, how many people you talk to, how many you close, what kind of revenue is that bringing in? So everything you have to look at, the patterns, and you have to keep taking, keep an eye on all of it.
We actually ran into that in our business at one point as well, where someone was fudging their numbers and playing the game and saying they were doing all these calls, but somehow they just weren't making any, the sales calls weren't coming. They weren't able to book any sales calls. And we're like, what's going on? And the numbers that they reported looked great.
Yes.
And we had to really dig in to figure out what was going on. And it's hard as an honest and authentic and genuine person to believe that people do those sorts of things, especially when they tell you to your face and you're picking up all the good vibes from them. But it's real. And you have to, as the business owner, the buck stops with you. You have to be able to dig into stuff and sniff around when the numbers aren't making sense.
Yes. Yeah. We actually know that each of our people, all of our staff accountants, they cover a certain amount of revenue for us for clients. And so I don't need to have spyware on their computers or know what hours they're working or, make sure we're checking it all the time. I know who's working because I know how quickly it's done. Everybody has metrics of, when all the reports are supposed to be done, when the bank feed's supposed to be empty, how many clients are supposed to be taken care of. So I know immediately what's happening. And I think that's really important in any business. I love my company and I love my employees. But in order to build, and we can actually talk about this too, in order to build a culture that is outstanding, you have to have outstanding people. And you do have to dig in. You can't just be blindly trusting. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah. So how do you, what are some tips that you have or what you've seen that really works for that culture building and what you just talked about?
Yeah. So I'm finding more and more the bigger we get, the more it becomes a culture. We have been doubling and tripling year over year. So it's been hard on some of the employees that have been with us longer because every 6 months, the company's different. And I've lost some of the early employees because I think, it was just the two of us or just the three of us. And it felt like it was just girlfriends. And when it started transitioning more and more into a company, the feeling and the expectation that they had of what they thought it was going to be like was changing. So they transitioned out. So in order to avoid some of that, because I learned a lot as well, and I've had some heartache with some of those things, is to build a culture. And part of that culture is you really do need to have a vision statement, a mission statement, and core values. There's a great book called Teamwork by Natalia Zacharin that actually has 3 chapters that are super short and really easy. So I built out my vision, mission, and core values in an hour because it sounds like it's like this huge project and it might be so difficult. And, how you're supposed to know what that should be. But you can actually, if you read those chapters, it makes it really easy. And that just helps you to determine who's a good fit for your company. If everybody understands the core values and the mission of the company, the ones that aren't a really good fit will actually transition out themselves. They just won't fit in with the rest of the people. Same thing when you're interviewing. You'll be able to tell right away who's going to be good for your team and who's not going to be good for your team. And it really helps to make a decision. I was on a call with another client just last week, and it was one of those situations where his revenue went down because he lost some big clients. He had too many people on payroll. So he was in the red for several months. And I said, you can't keep going this way. You have to make a decision. The revenue, you've had 6 months to increase the revenue. That hasn't happened. That's a sales problem, right? So we talk about the sales. This is really, really important. So you have a sales problem, but also now you have to have a business that sustains the expenses, and you have too many people. So instead of feeling terrible about it and feeling you have to lay it off a bunch of people, you can have a feeling of you can really build out your culture and really build out your firm, your company to have the best that it possibly can. Because unfortunately, he's going to have to let go of a couple of people. He just can't sustain it. So we went over and we talked about the mission, the vision, the core values, and that helps you to really determine who is truly a good fit. So you can have the best possible people in your company. So I think that builds your culture, and you have to be a leader. All the things that you have to do as a business owner, you have to also be a leader. So it's not easy. A lot of us are not natural born leaders. I certainly am not. I read a lot about that. I have mentors. I have coaches. I really truly believe in learning from others and trying to be very honest with myself so that I can become a better and better leader. And as business owners, you're going to have to learn to become a leader also. And so you're the first one in line. If you're saying that your core value is integrity, you have to act with integrity.
Absolutely. And I actually went to a live workshop with Natalie and worked on all of this stuff a while back. And I second her book and her and everything that she teaches. I think is super valuable. I think for us, figuring out our core values for our business and even during the interview process, making them present to us on each of those core values, making sure that they know where we stand and what we're looking for in a team culture has been really helpful in making sure that we're going to fit long term. that this is a good partnership that we can work together to build something great that we're putting together. So I think you're right on point with that.
Yeah. And you could also use those, your mission, your vision, and your core values to help you choose your clients, because not every client is a great client for you. And in the beginning, when we're first starting out, we're just going to take anybody we can because we need the cash, and that's fine. But as your business grows, you need to become more discerning over who you're going to take as a client, who you can actually help, and who's a good fit for your company as well.
So for folks who are interested in learning more about you and what you do, where can they find you?
So I am on Instagram as Grow Your Bottom Line, on LinkedIn as Natalia Zacharin, and on Facebook, Zacharin Consulting. We also have a website, www.zacharinconsulting.com. That's probably the best way. There's a phone number on there as well if you want to text me or reach out to me. My email is there as well. So we're not great at social media, but we're out there.
Okay, awesome. Do you have a free giveaway?
I do. So for anybody that is interested in a free consultation, a financial consultation, we can talk about it's a great strategy session where I go through and I ask you a lot of questions about what's going on in your business, what's been happening, where you want to go, and we can discuss how to get there. So what pieces are you missing that you need to put into place in order to get to that next level? So it's a free 1-hour consultation that we do. Obviously we would love to have you hire us, but if you don't and it's not a good fit, that's totally fine as well. But it gives you a lot of information on what you should be looking for next, or who to hire if it's not a good fit for you.
Well, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate you. This was some massive gold nuggets for all of our solopreneur and small business owners. I think this will, a lot of notes were taken. So we appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed meeting both of you, and this was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.